Jack Reed stared at the message on his screen for the fifth time, still not quite believing what he was reading. The Galactic Council seal pulsed gently at the top of the invitation, its shifting colors confirming its authenticity. "They want me," he muttered, running a hand through his messy brown hair. This has to be a mistake. But it wasn't. The invitation clearly stated that Jack Reed, senior engineer at North American Space Agency, was formally invited to represent Earth at the 127th Galactic Engineering Summit. Earth had only joined the Galactic Council 8 months ago, after alien ships appeared over major cities worldwide. The aliens, dozens of different species working together, had been watching humanity for decades and finally decided humans were ready for limited interaction. Most people called it what it really was, a polite form of probation. Jack's small apartment was cluttered with half-finished projects and electronic parts. Diagrams covered his walls, sketches of engine designs that his bosses had repeatedly rejected as too theoretical and impractical. Yet somehow, these same designs had caught the attention of beings from across the galaxy. The phone rang, startling him. It was his boss, Director Williams. "Reed, did you get the message?" "Yes, sir. I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake. The Council specifically asked for you by name. They've reviewed your work on adaptive propulsion systems." Jack blinked. "My work. But the committee shelved that project last year. Apparently, the aliens have better taste than our funding board," Williams said with a dry laugh. "Look, I'll be straight with you. This is mostly political. Earth needs to show up, and you're the sacrifice. These alien engineers are centuries ahead of us. They probably invited a human as a courtesy, or worse, for entertainment." Jack's stomach tightened. "So I'm being sent to be laughed at." "You're being sent to observe and learn," Williams corrected. "Bring back everything you can. Consider it reconnaissance." 3 weeks later, Jack stood in a departure bay, a single bag packed with clothes and notebooks. The alien ship that would transport him looked like a massive silver teardrop, seamless and gleaming under the hangar lights. A tall, blue-skinned being with 4 arms approached him. "Engineer Reed, I am Kelb, your liaison to the summit. Please follow me." Inside the ship, Jack tried not to gawk at the technology surrounding him. There were no visible controls, just glowing surfaces that Kelb touched in specific patterns. "Your first time on a council vessel," Kelb observed, not asking a question. "That obvious, huh?" "Your species' expressions are transparent." There was something like amusement in Kelb's large, pupilless eyes. "The journey to Central Station will take 3 days in your Earth measurement. You may wish to study these materials before arrival." Kelb handed him a small crystal that glowed faintly. "Touch it to any surface." When Jack did, the crystal projected information about the summit's attending species and their technological specialties. He scrolled through details of the Valari, noted as the foremost experts in propulsion technology. Their representative, Chief Engineer Morden, had developed the current standard for faster-than-light travel used by most council ships. "The Valari are particularly interested in meeting you," Kelb said. "Really? Why?" "Your theories on adaptive propulsion directly contradict Morden's established principles. Some find this amusing." Jack's heart sank. So Williams was right. He was invited to be mocked. The ship accelerated without any sensation of movement, the blue marble of Earth shrinking rapidly in the viewing port. Jack squared his shoulders and began studying the crystal's contents more intensely. If he was going to be humanity's representative at this summit, he'd make damn sure he wasn't just there for alien entertainment. He might not have their technology, but Jack Reed had something they might not expect. The stubborn determination that had driven humans to reach for the stars long before they knew what was waiting out there. The Central Station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its petals extending outward in a spiral pattern. Jack pressed his face against the viewing port as their ship approached, unable to hide his amazement. Each petal contained what looked like an entire city, with thousands of lights twinkling against the darkness of space. Impressive, isn't it? Kelb said, standing beside him. The station houses representatives from over 300 species. Jack nodded, speechless. The ship docked smoothly at one of the outer pedals, and Kelb led him through a series of hallways filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated rather than walked, while others moved on multiple legs or no legs at all. Jack tried not to stare, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. The engineering summit occupies the 7th pedal, Kelb explained. Your quarters are there, along with presentation halls and workshops. They entered a large, dome-shaped room where dozens of alien engineers mingled. Strange smells and sounds filled the air as beings conversed in their native languages before their translator devices converted their words. "Ah, the human has arrived," a loud voice called out. The crowd parted, and a tall, silver-skinned being approached. He had a narrow face with 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, all focused intently on Jack. Chief Engineer Morden of the Valari, Kelb introduced with a slight bow. "So you're the Earth engineer with the, what did you call it? Adaptive propulsion theory." Morden's voice carried a musical quality, but his tone was clearly mocking. How charming. Jack extended his hand, then remembered the briefing notes about Valari customs and quickly withdrew it. "It's an honor to meet you, Chief Engineer. Your work on quantum displacement is legendary." "Yes, it is," Morden agreed without humility. "Perhaps you'd care to explain your theory to everyone. We're all quite curious about Earth's approach to physics." Jack realized he was being put on the spot. Around him, dozens of alien faces turned to watch. Some didn't bother hiding their amusement. "My theory suggests that instead of fighting against space-time distortions, we could design engines that adapt to and utilize those natural forces," Jack explained, keeping his voice steady. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd. "Like building a boat instead of a dam." Morden's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "How quaint. Primitive, even. Space-time doesn't work that way, human. You can't simply go with the flow at faster-than-light speeds. With proper gravitational mapping and predictive algorithms." Jack started. "Algorithms?" Morden interrupted. "Your species has barely mastered basic quantum computing. The calculations needed for such a system would take your most powerful computers centuries to process." More laughter followed. Jack felt his face grow hot, but he kept his expression neutral. "Perhaps I could learn from your expertise while I'm here," he said diplomatically. "Yes, that would be wise." Morden turned to the crowd. "The human wishes to learn. How refreshing. We should encourage such ambition from younger species." Jack spent the rest of the evening being paraded around like an exotic pet. Each introduction followed the same pattern, initial politeness followed by thinly veiled condescension once Jack explained his work. By the time Kelb showed him to his quarters, his head was pounding from the constant translation chatter, and his pride felt thoroughly bruised. "Tomorrow's symposium begins at first cycle," Kelb informed him. "Chief Engineer Morden will be presenting his latest work on dimensional shifting." Alone in his room, Jack sat on the edge of the strange gel-like bed and pulled out his notebook. Despite the humiliation, he had observed fascinating technologies throughout the station. He began sketching what he'd seen, making notes of questions to ask. If the aliens wanted to treat him like an ignorant child, so be it. He'd use their underestimation to his advantage. They thought humans were simple. They had no idea how dangerous simple could be. 3 days into the summit, Jack had filled 2 notebooks with observations and sketches. He attended every presentation, asked questions when allowed, and quietly absorbed the aliens' technologies. Most ignored him after the initial novelty wore off, which suited him fine. Being invisible had its advantages. On the 4th day, Jack sat alone during the meal break, studying Morden's presentation on dimensional shifting. The concept was brilliant but relied heavily on brute computational power, typical of the Valari approach. "May I join you?" a soft voice asked. Jack looked up to see a small alien with pale green skin and large oval eyes. Unlike the Valari's hard angles, This being had softer features and moved with a fluid grace. "Please," Jack gestured to the empty seat. "I am Tella, engineer from the Novan system." Her translator produced a feminine voice. "Your questions during the quantum resonance discussion were interesting." Jack smiled, surprised by the genuine compliment. "Thanks. I'm Jack Reed, Earth." "I know who you are," Tella said. "The human who challenges Morden's theories." "Not challenging so much as offering an alternative approach," Jack corrected. "Though no one seems interested." Tella leaned forward. "Some are interested. Not all of us worship at the altar of Valari engineering." She glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. "Have you heard about the challenge?" "What challenge?" "The summit concludes with an engineering competition. Participants design and build vessels to navigate the Void Cascade." Jack had read about the Cascade in his briefing materials, a region of space with unpredictable gravitational anomalies that made conventional travel nearly impossible. The winner's species receives priority consideration for resource allocation and development grants. Tella continued. "The Valari have won the last 4 summits." "Let me guess," Jack said. "Earth wasn't informed about this competition." Tella's face rippled slightly, the Novan equivalent of a sympathetic smile. "Newer council members are rarely invited to compete. It's not official policy, but tradition. And traditions are hard to break," Jack finished. "Precisely. But there is no rule against your participation." Tella slid a small crystal across the table. "The competition parameters. The Void Cascade simulation begins in 6 days." Jack picked up the crystal. "Why are you telling me this?" Tella stood. "The Valari dismissed my people's engineering approaches for decades. We were too primitive to contribute meaningfully." Her large eyes fixed on Jack. "Until we proved them wrong through demonstration rather than debate. Sometimes the galaxy needs reminding that different doesn't mean inferior." With that, she glided away, leaving Jack staring at the crystal. That evening, Jack accessed the competition data in his quarters. The challenge was even more complex than he'd imagined. Contestants had to build a vessel capable of navigating through a section of the Void Cascade, a swirling mess of gravitational waves and spatial distortions that conventional shields couldn't fully counter. The Valari approach, according to the previous competition records, involved massive energy expenditure to power through the distortions. Effective, but incredibly wasteful. Jack sketched ideas late into the night, his mind racing. This was exactly the kind of problem his adaptive propulsion theory was designed to solve. Instead of fighting the gravitational waves, a ship could be designed to work with them, like a surfer riding ocean waves. He'd need parts, specific components that weren't available in the standard engineering kits provided to summit attendees. Getting them would mean venturing into the station's lower levels, trading with merchants and maintenance workers. "This is crazy," Jack muttered to himself, looking at his growing design. "They'll laugh even harder when they see this." But then he remembered Director Williams' words, "Considerate reconnaissance," and Tella's meaningful look. Different doesn't mean inferior. Jack made his decision. He might not win, but he would show them what human engineering could do. He tucked his designs into his pocket and headed for the station's maintenance section to find the first components he needed. The maintenance levels of Central Station hummed with activity even during sleep cycles. Jack moved through cramped corridors where pipes and conduits lined the walls like metal veins. Here, away from the polished upper levels, the station showed its true nature, a working machine kept running by beings from dozens of species. "You lost, surface dweller." A stocky blue alien with 4 arms blocked Jack's path. His name badge identified him as Crix, Maintenance Level 3. "Not lost. Looking for parts." Jack showed Crix his list. "For a project." Crix scanned the list with 3 eyes while his 4th remained fixed on Jack. "Summit Engineer. What's a fancy upper level doing parts hunting and maintenance?" "Building something unofficial," Jack answered honestly. "Something different." Crix's mouth split into what might have been a smile. "Different, huh? Valari giving you trouble. Jack's surprise must have shown on his face because Crix laughed, a rumbling sound like rocks in a tumbler. We see everything down here. The mighty Valari and their perfect machines. He spat something that sizzled when it hit the floor. Follow me, human. I know where to find most of these. Over the next 3 nights, Jack became a familiar face in the maintenance levels. He traded Earth stories for parts and advice. The station's maintenance workers knew the real workings of alien technology better than the engineers who designed it. They knew what failed, what lasted, and what was purely for show. This gravitic sensor is from a Valari ship, Crix explained, handing Jack a curved device. Fell off during docking. Officially marked as disposed. Works perfectly fine. I can't take this, Jack protested. It's valuable. Consider it a donation to science. Crix winked with 2 eyes. Besides, we're curious what you're building. Word's spreading. Back in his quarters, Jack worked through sleep cycles, assembling his creation piece by piece. His design ignored conventional ship architecture. Instead of the standard symmetrical form with external propulsion, Jack's vessel looked almost organic, an asymmetrical shape with curved surfaces and what appeared to be flexible joint sections. The ship's core was his breakthrough. A modified gravitational sensor array connected to a rudimentary but functional quantum processor he'd cobbled together from discarded parts. The system wouldn't predict gravitational waves like the Valari ships. Instead, it would detect them in real time and instantly adjust the ship's structure to flow with them. On the 5th night, as Jack was connecting the final power relays, his door chimed. "Come in," he called cautiously. Tella entered, her large eyes widening at the sight of Jack's creation. "You're actually building it," she whispered. "I heard rumors, but is that a good surprise or a bad one?" Jack asked, wiping grease from his hands. Tella moved around the ship, studying its unusual form. "It's unlike anything I've seen. The design principles are completely contrary to established theory." "That's kind of the point," Jack admitted. "Will it get me disqualified?" "No," Tella said, still examining the craft. "The rules only specify that entries must be built during the summit period using available materials. They never defined available." She looked at Jack with new respect. "The competition begins tomorrow. Are you ready?" Jack ran a hand along his creation's smooth surface. It wasn't pretty, a patchwork of different materials and components, but his simulation showed it would work. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said, "though I'm still not sure how to transport it to the competition bay without everyone seeing it beforehand." Tella's mouth curved upward. "Leave that to me. I have access to cargo transporters." She hesitated. "The Valari will not take this well. Morden especially." Jack shrugged. "I'm just a primitive human entering for the experience, right? What harm could I possibly do?" Tella made the rippling expression Jack now recognized as her version of a smile. Indeed. What harm could one human possibly do to the established order of galactic engineering? The competition hall buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy filled the viewing platforms, surrounding a massive circular arena. At the center stood a large holographic display showing the Void Cascade, a swirling, violent storm of gravity waves and spatial distortions rendered in reds and purples. Jack stood nervously at the edge of the competitors' area, where 7 ships of various designs waited for their turn. Most were sleek and powerful-looking, covered in complex technology and glowing energy fields. The Valari ship dominated the area, a gleaming silver vessel with massive propulsion arrays and what looked like hundreds of gravitational stabilizers covering its hull. Morden moved among the other competitors, accepting their praise with practiced grace. When he spotted Jack, his 4 eyes narrowed. The human actually entered. He said loudly enough for others to hear, "How bold." "Just here to learn," Jack replied with a shrug. "And where is your vessel?" Morden looked around mockingly. Or did Earth's finest engineer come empty-handed? Before Jack could answer, A side door opened and Tella entered, guiding a hovering platform. On it sat Jack's creation, covered by a simple tarp. The room fell silent as she positioned it next to the other ships. "What is that?" someone whispered. Tella nodded to Jack, who stepped forward and pulled away the tarp. Gasps and then laughter filled the room. Compared to the other sleek vessels, Jack's ship looked almost primitive. Its asymmetrical shape and patchwork construction made it appear more like salvage than a competition entry. "That's your ship?" Morden's voice dripped with amusement. "It looks like it would fall apart before even reaching the cascade." More laughter followed. Jack kept his face neutral, though his stomach twisted with doubt. Tella stood beside him, her expression unreadable to most aliens, but Jack recognized her support. The competition organizer, a tall being with translucent skin, called for order. "The challenge begins. Each vessel will navigate the simulated void cascade path. Success is measured by completion time and energy efficiency. Valeri's ship will begin." Morden stepped forward confidently. His ship hummed to life, its engines glowing bright blue as it lifted into the arena. The holographic cascade activated, and the Valari ship plunged into the swirling chaos. The crowd watched as Morden's vessel pushed through the gravitational distortions by sheer power. When particularly violent waves hit, the ship's stabilizers flared brightly, forcing a path through. After 7 minutes, it emerged from the other side to applause. Completion time: 7 minutes, 12 seconds. Energy efficiency: 32%. The organizer announced. A new record. Morden returned to even more applause, shooting a smug look at Jack. 3 more ships attempted the course. 1 completed it with worse stats than Morden's. 2 others had to abort halfway through with damaged systems. The 5th ship, piloted by a crystalline being, failed spectacularly when its engines overloaded. Finally, only Jack's turn remained. The crowd had grown restless, many openly placing bets on how quickly the human strange vessel would fail. "Human ship, prepare for challenge," the organizer called. Jack stepped toward his creation, placing his hand on its curved hull. The surface responded to his touch, panels sliding open to reveal a simple control interface. "Good luck," Tella said quietly. "Thanks for your help," Jack replied. "No matter what happens, this was worth trying." Jack climbed into his ship. Unlike the others, his had no chairs or restraints, just a standing platform surrounded by flexible controls. He activated the systems and felt the ship come alive around him. The vessel rose unsteadily, wobbling slightly as Jack adjusted to the controls. Laughter echoed through the arena again. 30 seconds to entry, the organizer announced. Jack took a deep breath and guided his ship toward the swirling maelstrom of the void cascade. As the first gravitational waves reached out to grab his vessel, he heard Morden call out mockingly, "Try not to die, human." The moment Jack's ship entered the void cascade, something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting against the first gravitational wave like the other vessels had, his craft seemed to twist slightly, its hull flexing as the wave passed through it rather than around it. The audience fell silent, watching in confusion. "What is he doing?" someone whispered. The second wave hit harder. Jack felt his ship shudder, but instead of activating shields or powering through, he let the wave guide his vessel, using minimal power to adjust its course. His display lit up with real-time data as the sensor array detected each distortion moments before impact. Jack worked the controls with fluid movements, almost like a dance. When a particularly violent eddy approached, he didn't increase power, he reduced it, letting his ship roll with the gravitational current before gently nudging it back on course. In the control room, the audience watched in growing amazement as the human's patchwork vessel moved through the cascade with unexpected grace. Unlike Morden's ship, which had plowed through with brute force, Jack's craft seemed to flow with the chaos, bending and twisting, but never breaking. "Impossible," Morden muttered, his 4 eyes fixed on the display. "His power output is barely registering." Inside the ship, Jack lost himself in the rhythm of the cascade. His sensor array translated the gravitational waves into patterns he could feel through the control interface. It was like surfing on Earth's oceans, reading the waves, moving with them, using their own power instead of fighting against it. A massive distortion appeared directly ahead, the kind that had forced two previous competitors to abort. Jack took a deep breath and reduced power even further, letting his ship drift sideways relative to the wave. The vessel rotated slightly, its flexible joints allowing it to bend around the distortion rather than through it. For a moment, the ship disappeared from the tracking systems, causing gasps from the audience. Morden stepped forward triumphantly, assuming the human had failed. As expected, he began, but stopped when Jack's vessel reappeared on the other side of the distortion, completely intact and accelerating smoothly. How did he? Morden couldn't finish his sentence, shock evident in all four of his eyes. Jack was now 3/4 through the course, moving faster as he gained confidence in his system. The ship responded perfectly to each adjustment, its unusual design proving ideal for the chaotic environment. Where others had struggled against the cascade's unpredictable nature, Jack's approach embraced it. The final section contained the most violent distortions, a swirling vortex of gravitational shears that had damaged even Morden's powerful vessel. Jack approached it carefully, studying the patterns. Instead of going around or through, he guided his ship into a spiral path that matched the vortex's own rotation. For a tense moment, his vessel spun rapidly, looking dangerously out of control. Several audience members cried out, certain they were witnessing a disaster. But Jack had calculated precisely. His spiral path used the vortex's own momentum to slingshot his ship forward, shooting out of the cascade's exit point like a stone from a sling. The arena fell completely silent as Jack's vessel glided smoothly back to the landing area. The organizer checked and rechecked the readings before announcing in a stunned voice, "Completion time, 4 minutes, 8 seconds. Energy efficiency, 89%. The silence broke into a storm of voices. Some shouted in disbelief, others in excitement. Tella rushed forward, her face rippling with emotion as Jack emerged from his ship, looking slightly dizzy but triumphant. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Jack steadied himself against his vessel, still processing what had happened. He had not only completed the course, he had shattered Morden's record in both time and efficiency. Across the arena, Morden stood frozen, his silver face unreadable, but his rigid posture telling its own story. His gaze met Jack's across the distance, 4 eyes narrowed in a mixture of disbelief and something new. Respect, perhaps, or fear. The human had not just survived the void cascade. He had mastered it. The next morning, Jack found himself in a large chamber before the Galactic Engineering Council. 7 senior engineers sat at a curved table, including representatives from the major spacefaring species. Morden sat among them, his silver face carefully neutral. "Engineer Reed of Earth," the head counselor began, "your performance yesterday has caused quite a stir." Jack stood straight, tired but proud. Word of his victory had spread throughout the station overnight. In the corridors, aliens who had previously ignored him now watched him pass with curious eyes. "The Council wishes to examine your vessel," the head counselor continued. "Some have suggested your success may have involved unauthorized methods." Jack understood the implication. They thought he had cheated. "My ship uses no forbidden technology," Jack replied calmly. "I welcome any inspection." Morden leaned forward. "Then explain how a primitive craft built from salvaged parts outperformed vessels using our most advanced systems." "It's not about the parts," Jack said. "It's about the approach." He stepped to a nearby display and activated it, showing his ship's design. "Your vessels fight against gravitational distortions. Mine works with them." "Impossible," another counselor objected. "The math is different from what you're used to," Jack finished. "Earth vessels developed in a gravity much stronger than most Council species' homeworlds. We've always had to be efficient with our designs." For the next hour, Jack explained his adaptive propulsion theory, showing equations and design principles that made the counselors lean forward in their seats. Even Morden's hostile expression gradually shifted to intense concentration. The ship doesn't predict distortions, Jack concluded. It feels them and responds in real time, like a sea creature swimming through ocean currents. Silence fell when he finished. The counselors exchanged glances, some skeptical, others intrigued. "We will examine your vessel ourselves," the head counselor announced. "Until then, this session is adjourned." Outside the chamber, Tella waited for Jack. "How did it go?" "They think I cheated," Jack said with a tired smile. "Of course they do." Tella's face rippled. "You challenged their understanding of physics. That's worse than cheating." 3 hours later, Jack was called back to the chamber. The counselors looked different now. Less suspicious, more thoughtful. Morton sat slightly apart, his 4 eyes fixed on a datapad. "Engineer Reed," the head counselor began formally, "we have examined your vessel thoroughly. Its design principles are unorthodox but valid. Your victory stands." A wave of relief washed over Jack. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been. "Furthermore," the counselor continued, "the Council recognizes the potential of adaptive propulsion theory. We would be interested in further development of this technology." Jack nodded, almost dizzy with the implications. Earth would benefit enormously from this recognition. As the session ended, Jack found Morton waiting for him in the corridor. The Valari engineer stood stiffly, pride visibly struggling with curiosity. "Your approach," Morton said finally, "it contradicts established principles I've worked with for decades." "But it works," Jack replied simply. "Yes." Morton's inner eyes blinked slowly. "I've studied your equations. They're elegant in their simplicity." He seemed to be fighting with himself before continuing. "I was wrong to dismiss your ideas." Coming from a Valari, this was as close to an apology as Jack would get. "The Council has assigned me to lead the Adaptive Propulsion Research Initiative," Morton continued. "I would welcome your input." Jack considered the offer carefully. Working with the being who had mocked him mercilessly wouldn't be easy, but the potential benefits for Earth were too great to ignore. "I'd be happy to collaborate," Jack said, extending his hand before remembering Valari customs. To his surprise, Morton studied the gesture for a moment, then awkwardly extended his own hand. "I believe this is how humans seal agreements." Their handshake was witnessed by passing engineers who stopped to stare at the unlikely sight. The proud Valari and the human, equals at last. Later, as Jack packed his quarters for the return journey to Earth, Tella visited one last time. "You've changed things," she said. "Not just propulsion theory, but perceptions. The Council is already discussing accelerating Earth's full member status." Jack smiled, thinking of all the notebooks he'd filled, the knowledge he'd returned with. Not bad for a primitive human, right? Perhaps all species have something to teach, if others are willing to learn. Tella's large eyes shone with warmth. "Safe journey home, Jack Reed. The galaxy will remember your name."